Okay. And we're recording, so I'm ready whenever you are.
Okay, I'd like to call to order the Tuesday, April 14, 2020, joint meeting of the Middleton Board of Selectmen and Finance Committee. I'll read the little Zoom thing. Due to the state of emergency in Massachusetts due to the COVID-19 outbreak, this meeting will held via Zoom, an internet-based meeting space. It is the intent that the virtual meeting space will be made accessible to the public. However, if this is not possible, despite best efforts, the full and complete transcript of this meeting will be posted on the town's website as soon as practical upon the conclusion of these proceedings. So we'll go right to Town Administrator, Mr. Sheehan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So no updates tonight. Everything really is focused on the couple of capital items in front of us. I will point out for those of you who don't use Zoom a lot, not that I'm an expert, but there's a little spot on the bottom bar where it says participants. And if you click on that, you'll see that Chief Martinuck and Sarah Wood are also on, along with Paul Pellicelli and Judy Stickney, who does our minutes for us. I think those are the only visitors. So so Sarah is here, the chief is here. Really what drove tonight's meeting or forced us to have the meeting this week is the print deadline for the election warrant. And the clerk is going to print later this week, and that forced us to come to a decision on what to do with the fire department's pump truck, engine one. When we met on March 7th, we talked about doing that as a capital exclusion, which is essentially it's a 1-year override. So we would raise the entire $710,000 in 1 year, and then that would go off of the tax rate the following year. The impact of that is about 32 cents on the tax rate, so 32 cents per thousand, which on the average tax bill is about $202 for the year. And again, that's a 1 year. At Costa's suggestion the other day, we also went out to our financial advisors and asked them what the impact would be if we did a 5-year or a 10-year borrow for this rather than as a 1-year exclusion. And that information is not in the packet, but it's in one of the supplemental documents that I sent out, I think yesterday. And that two schedules on there, one for a 5-year and one for a 10-year. The rate impact on the 5-year is just under a dime, roughly 9.5 cents in year 2, which is the high year. And then it tapers off a little bit to about 8 cents per thousand. And then on the 10-year borrow, the rate is obviously significantly lower. It's roughly a nickel in the high year in year 2, and then drops down below a nickel in year 3, and gets down to about 3.5 cents in year 10. So I also understand this is as much a political decision as a financial decision, or probably more of a political decision than a financial decision. So there's no way for us to do this within the levy. So we would have to go forward with this one way or another using the Proposition 2.5 exclusion processes. So,
Andy, I have a question that been kind of bugging me.
mm-hmm.
And I could be mistaken, but my memory tells me that we bought the last pumper truck out of the stabilization fund,
That's correct.
Which was around $450,000.
Correct.
What's driving the cost of this one? I mean, it's almost twice as much.
Yeah, so I think when we looked at this, and I'll ask the chief to chime in, but I think when we looked at it just a year ago, it was at 680, and so it is just it's just inflation. But chief, I'll let you.
But yeah, the other trucks we got were 20 years ago, and we got them both for the same price. Since then, obviously, prices have gone up, and the average price of a truck is about $700,000. And even now with the tariffs, it's gone up. Each year it goes up about 10%.
How much was the Ferrara pumper we purchased, was it 3 years ago?
No, the HME, the KME we purchased in 16 or 15 was 5.25 maybe, 480. I forget what the price was, but
That's engine one?
no, that's engine 2. That's
the-
the newest truck.
That's the one we bought out of the stabilization fund.
Yes.
But that's not a pumper. That's an engine, right? I mean,
Same
that's
thing, same thing,
it is a pumper?
same thing, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Well, that being the case, I'd be inclined to go with the debt exclusion, the capital exclusion.
I will say, I told Andy earlier today, I did put in for a grant for this, and by some chance that we get it. Usually the grant's around $450,000, which obviously we'd have to match a lot less, but we won't know that till later on. So it's just so you know.
If you want my opinion, and rather than do a 5-year or whatever, I would rather review it again next year. I just think that this looks bad for the town to try a 2.5 when people aren't going to be back on their feet. And I know we probably are better than most communities, but I just don't see, first of all, I don't see it passing because I think people are going to be nervous. And second of all, is I think they're going to be looking at us like at a time when people don't have jobs, might have medical conditions to be asking for an override is, I don't know. I'd rather have you ask for the whole money again next year than vote for something for 5 years, but still have it come out this year. I think this is just not the year. I mean, I understand that it costs more money the longer you wait, but you know, from what I'm hearing from people are nervous.
I have to agree with Tim. I think people are nervous, and I don't, as much as I don't want to put it off again, I mean, I'd rather have that cut than something else.
Chief, when would you know about the grant?
Let's see, it's closed, I think, this is what, March? It closed in February, and usually, well, with this situation, I don't know if it's going to slow them down or not. Usually we know by summer-ish, but I don't know if they're working or what's going on. So
and how long do you have to use the grant if you get it?
It usually a year, but we can usually ask for an extension.
Okay.
And again, because of the situation, I think they'll grant some of that stuff. So.
Okay. Thank you.
I think if we were successful in the grant, and Chief, I assume that's a FEMA grant?
It's the assistant to firefighters grant, the one that I've been very lucky with in the past. So it's.
So, I mean, if we are successful in that case, then I think to George's earlier point, where if it was 450, we're probably talking maybe 250,000 match that would be required from the town. I'd be comfortable at that point just going to our reserve fund rather than talking about any type of financing for this. But if to Tim's point and what Tim and the chief are saying, if we go to a 1-year delay on this and we do decide to take a bond, I would take completely off the table the 10-year bond. And I think the longest period I'd look at is a 5 at most.
I would agree with that. I think if you move forward with the hit at this point, you'll look like you told Jeff. You know, a lot of backlash.
Well, I mean, I also don't want to lose any momentum that we've been making on the former golf course property. To the point, Andy, that you talked about at length is the low historical rates. I just don't want to be going before the town in rapid succession for overrides, given what's happening right now. Secondly, and I know we talked about this at our last selectmen's meeting, but now we've got the FinCom on the meeting as well. I mean, I think we don't have any projections or even understanding yet what we need to look at in our overall town meeting has been moved till June. But, you know, my biggest concern is some of the revenue side of the ledger that are being hit pretty hard or likely to be hit pretty hard, especially around food, meals tax, as well as the potential that we may be looking at a local aid once the state has some clarity of what's happening with their revenue.
Excise tax will get hit hard too.
Yeah, obviously. I mean, we've been waiting every year for the excise tax to start coming down, and I think this may be the impetus for it.
Yeah, and we've started to look at our revenue numbers, and we've adjusted based on the information that's available to us. But, you know, right now there's a lot that's unknown. So, you know, if we get back, you know, start to open up again in June, and the economy starts to return to some sense of what it was before, or some sense of normal, that's one thing. If this lags into July, then you know, kind of all bets are off, and then you know, we don't know yet what's going to happen with local aid. We don't expect that there'll be a cut in the current year, but we would certainly expect a cut in 21. The good thing is we don't rely on local aid the way that poorer communities do. So the impact on us is going to be less than it would be on a city like Lynn or Lawrence. And I would expect that, based on the work that they've done in the last couple of years to address education funding, that they'll hold education harmless to the extent that they can, which, you know, it's good and bad. It just means that the unrestricted government aid is where it's going to hit, and that hits more on the municipal side than the school side.
I mean, in that point, I think it would be helpful to look back at 08, 09, and this is for Senator and the Finance Committee and you, Andy, when we started seeing pretty regular decreases in our excise tax, meals tax. Remember, we didn't have the supplemental meals tax at the time. And maybe model what that may look like in a much more accelerated fashion, rolling into surely for the rest of this fiscal year, but really rolling in through the remainder, moving into the next fiscal year.
Yeah, I think the big hit at that time was obviously was motor vehicle, and local aid took a huge hit. We only, in fiscal 21, I think, we were finally on track to reach where we were in fiscal 09 before they did the mid-year 9C cuts. And that was a difference of about $500,000. So you can imagine what we would have been able to accomplish with an extra $500,000 for the last 12 years.
I mean, just to that point, so I mean, we are, the budget that we had projected prior to COVID-19 occurring and what's happened with our economy was in the black, but we wasn't a huge amount of headroom there. So,
correct.
So back to this topic, but also, and it may not be logical for the agenda right now, but I know we have other items within the capital side that we were looking to provide some financing for, not an override, not a capital or a debt exclusion, a capital override, but that would have an effect on the general operating budget as it relates to paying for those acquisitions.
Yeah, so just briefly about that, we've plugged those numbers in. We got those numbers from Hilltop. We've plugged that into Sarah has plugged that into the model. That was, in a way, and Sarah, you can correct me if I'm wrong, a bit of a wash, because we had put in quite a large debt number on the assumption that we would be going forward with a facilities project of some sort during 21. We've backed out of that, and then we rolled the ban last week, so that saved us on interest payments. I don't remember if it was exactly a wash, Sarah, and I apologize for putting you on the spot if you don't have it right in front of you. But
No, that's okay. Can you guys hear me? I've been having microphone
Yeah.
issues. Okay. So we had originally budgeted $159,000 in short-term interest, which was the same as what we budgeted last year for the ban, anticipating that we would kind of be rolling it, but also taking out new interest. So our actual interest that we sold last week, it came back at $55,000. So there was about a savings of a little over $100,000 that we had in the budget as it was right off the bat when COVID-19 hit us. So that kind of helps offset any revenue shortfalls we may see. And as far as the departmental supplies, capital outlay that we were planning on taking out for debt service, FY21 would be an interest-only payment, and we wouldn't see any principal payments until FY22. So that kind of helps us for, obviously, for 21, and then we would see the impact really hitting in FY22 at, I think it was around 83,000 in the first year. I could be mistaken, but I don't have it in front of me. But that's to the best of my knowledge.
Anybody else from the finance committee that wishes to say anything?
It's risky right now, and I don't think we can really see in the next quarter, what's going to happen. If the economy starts opening up rapidly, which I think is kind of unlikely because we don't have the testing in place now to be able to do that. If it comes back rapidly, yeah, next year will look okay. But I don't see it happening. Until the testing gets in place, so that we can start, getting everybody mixing it up again. It's going to be pretty grim, I think, for the next couple of quarters. So I don't see how a 2.5 is gonna pass. In fact, I think they'll think we're crazy for asking for it. It sounds to me like delaying it for a year and then just if things turn around, just buying it. Certainly that'd be number one. Maybe financing it for 1 year or a couple years. I mean, I could certainly support that. 10 years, probably not, but that's kind of my view on this particular the pumper truck. Anyway,
The caveat being, if the grant comes through late summer, you can maybe look at a special meeting in the fall.
yeah. Now, if the grant comes through and we can pay for it out of, say, the stabilization, yeah, that completely changes the picture.
It's all the chief's job.
Anybody else?
So, Tim?
I would certainly agree with that, John. I think, if we put this on the table at this time, everyone's going to think that the finance committee, the board of selectmen, all of us live under a rock, and we have not been, made aware of what's going on out there. So as much as I think we all understand that, it's a need for the town, and I know, Chief, you've been kind of holding off, as much as you can and trying to get by. We know the repairs are adding up, as we saw, what you're spending to repair the existing pumper trucks. But I think holding off, if that grant comes in, I think that makes our job a lot easier, and certainly for special town meeting in the fall, that would be the time.
I think under these circumstances, no one would have ever thought that this was going to happen. So, I mean,
Of course
we have
not,
to do
yeah.
what we have to do. So it's
Right.
So I would ask to that vein that, Chief, I know that you are very honest in your budget on repairs. And I know some of your other counterparts, DPW, are honest as well in terms of what may be needed with some of our fleet needs. So I just ask you to also kind of take a look again if you think that if a delay of a year on this, what the potential effect could be on your maintenance budget. So we can reflect that in the time that we have now with a June town meeting rather than earlier in May.
You know, I just don't want us to lose sight of the fact that we've delayed replacing the ladder truck. And, you know, I mean, I agree, maybe we should wait a year on the pump as well, but we just can't lose sight of what we're not replacing.
Yeah, George, I think that we ought to bring this up specifically at town meeting and say we're deliberately delaying this a year because because of the risk that we're facing right now. But we wanted to come forward with it, but it just didn't look like it was going to fly.
Chief, with the long lead time of getting, you know, a new fire truck, is most of FY21, we wouldn't have had the new truck even if we had gone forward with it in June.
Correct. It takes,
So-
if we got the money in July, if we order it, it's gonna take about at least a year anyways.
So for next year, your maintenance budget as constructed assumed that you wouldn't have a new fire truck.
Correct. I mean, I can't obviously plan for my crystal ball. I wish I had
Yeah.
one, but you know, if it comes up, it comes up. We'll have to, you know, but
Yeah.
it's like we did this year. I mean, a lot of that was unforeseen. So,
Okay.
and to George's point, I mean, I appreciate, you know, obviously the more we push this stuff off, the more it's gonna sneak up on us again. But again, no one would have ever thought this would happen. So it's, you know, it's at some point we're gonna have to play catch up. You know, but I mean, it is what it is. We have to do what we have to do. So it's.
Chief, even if it's you, I do like the idea that somebody at town meeting should just step up and say, hey, listen, here's the things we had planned, here's the things we've changed, so that nobody's surprised a year from now that's like going, hey, we've always had this plan, but we thought it fiscally responsible to delay, so that they know it's coming.
Exactly. I mean, obviously you got to tell the people know that we can't buy this right now, but at some point you're going to have to buy, like George, you know, a ladder truck, a pump. It's, you know, that in the future. So it's, but
this
right
is
now we shouldn't be buying it right now.
Yeah, and to that point, Tim and whoever else brought it up at town meeting, I think we should consider not a town meeting, not just having a discussion of why we've delayed a pumper truck and other items, but really what as a town we have done to reflect and change as we'll be moving forward with the next fiscal year budget in light of COVID-19 and some of the decisions that we're making. Some of the activities we're doing this budget a little bit different than we've done in past budgets. For example, looking to finance some of the bigger capital needs. Historically, we've always been a pay-as-you-go.
All right, so am I getting a motion on this?
So I'll move to remove the pumper engine 1 from this year's warrant and reconsider it next year.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Do I have any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll take a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? None. Passes unanimously. New business. Andy?
Nothing else.
Yeah.
Well, just a quick, I guess, in terms of the budget, like I said, Sarah is working on both the capital and operating. We're a little bit stuck right now because we're just waiting for some direction out of the state on things like local aid. So once that gets a little bit clearer, I didn't hear if the revenue meeting went forth today and what came out of that, but we'll plug that in. And if we have something to report next Tuesday at the Selectmen's meeting, we'll do that. Otherwise, we're in terms of our annual budget hearing, we put that off until May 7th, and I would suggest that whether we are open or not, we go forward and we have that on May 7th, even if we have to have it by Zoom. I think we're getting comfortable enough with Zoom, and I think we just need to move forward with some things. Maybe there are things that are not quite resolved at the end of May 7th, but hopefully we can get through 90% of what we need to get through.
Andy, at last week's meeting, we had talked about identifying a different date on a contingency if the June 10th town meeting couldn't go forward.
Yes.
Has any progress been made on that?
Yeah, so we looked at it. It's going to be snug to fit it in, but we'll fit it in by hook or by crook sometime after June 21st. One of probably the biggest challenge. So the clerk and the moderator are both available. The only other person that is really important to a town meeting is town council. They're going to be potentially tied up, and they can't really give us 2 days. They can't tie themselves up 2 days. So we either go forward on an odd day, like a Sunday, or we maybe we take our chances that there won't be any big legal issues, and we coordinate it so that we can get somebody by phone if they're from the firm if a big question comes up.
Okay.
Anybody else have anything?
Yeah, just one more item on the budget. Andy, given that all three towns in the Tri-Town have moved their town meeting dates, and maybe this is you as well, Costa, has there been any activities that have happened at the regional school level regarding the budget, or is this still a wait and see that's happening there?
Boxford, Selectmen and FinComs sent a letter saying, consider recertifying your FY21 budget at a 0% budget increase. Topsfield sent, a letter saying, reconsider your budget and hold the community assessment total to a 3% increase. I think both of those are short-sighted because we don't know what kind of issues will come up to try to resolve after having a long period of remote learning. You won't cover all the material. People will be in different places, and I don't see school physically resuming until September. So what I have talked about with the committee is not changing the budget, the FY21 budget, but making a firm commitment to limiting the FY22 budget.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I've got one question. Andy, is there any information from the state on the unemployment rate in Middleton?
No, I haven't heard anything from them, and I tried to find that the other day, and I haven't been able to track down where that is and how granular the data is and how frequently that gets updated. And it's an important point, John, because we hear national scale numbers and we hear statewide numbers, state scale numbers. We don't know what the impact really is locally. I can speak only for myself. I don't know a lot of people that are out of work right now. I'm sure some of you do, and but I can't guess at what the number is. Is it 5%? Is it 15%? Or is it 20%? So I am trying to get some granular data on that, but I haven't been able to yet.
Okay, thanks.
On the COVID front, there's some good news. The state reports the total number of cases, every day. And the increase on Sunday's reporting was, the highest. New cases in one day are at 2,615. And the past 2 days, the new cases were 1,392 and 1,296. So I don't know if it's enough to make any conclusions, but at least there's a little ray of light.
Exactly. All righty, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, we stand adjourned. Thank you all for participating. It's nice meeting you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
I'll plan for
Thank you.
7 o'clock next week for the regular board.